Hezbollah firing dozens of rockets towards northern Israel. This took place on Sunday. No casualties reported, but the country remains on high alert for a potential retaliatory attack from Iran. This after last month's assassination of a top Hamas official. And we've been talking about that prospect. Joining us right now with the geopolitical headlines heading into the week is Elbridge Colby, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development under President Trump. Good morning to you. We've been talking about some kind of retaliatory effort and just how much things escalate from here. What do you see?
Well, great to be with you, Andrew. It does look like the Israelis are thinking, according to Axios, that a strike is likely to happen in the coming days. And both Iran and Hezbollah have said, pretty direct things about some form of retaliation. So it does seem likely. And, of course, the U.S. moves with the carrier and the guided missile submarine and other assets also suggest that something is likely to happen.
OK, so play this out. Let's play the cards out. Let's say there's a retaliatory attack. Then what?
Look, I think we have to assume that this is going to go on for the foreseeable future. Obviously, the administration is trying to push a ceasefire hard. I think the parties, or at least some of the parties, I don't think Hamas are going to get together on Thursday to try to come to a ceasefire. But it doesn't seem like there's a meeting of the minds there. There does seem to be a conventional wisdom that none of the parties, including Iran, really wants a regional war. But it's not clear that it's entirely within their power to do so. And Hezbollah seems to be pretty aggressive, as we've seen. It's not clear that they're going to do exactly what, say, Tehran tells them, even if Tehran does want restraint.
How strong is Bibi Netanyahu's position inside of Israel right now, given all of the pressures, both from the U.S., but also, of course, from Iran on the other end?
It looks pretty strong compared to where he's been, Andrew. I mean, I think, again, the administration's clearly tried to push hard on him, and ideally they would have preferred another leader. But I mean, I think if we thought back in October, would Bibi still be here in August of the coming year, people would be surprised. And it does seem to reflect a pretty strong sense within Israel, and I think fairly so, that they can't allow a perception that they've been defeated in Gaza. You've seen the Israelis continue to be operating there and going after Hamas's military forces and so forth. So, again, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a clear basis for, a true resolution of the conflict where we'd see something approaching stability.
And maybe that's why the oil price is up, even as everyone says, they do too much. They strike the oil facilities in Iran. It kind of, sucks people in more broadly. What about Ukraine's incursion into Russia, Elbridge? What can you tell us about that?
Well, look, I think everybody's been pretty astounded and impressed by the Ukrainian move. I do think there are questions about what exactly the Ukrainians are trying to achieve. They've advanced into Russian territory. But, the main sort of thrust of the conflict is in Ukraine's east, where the Russians continue to make progress. Perhaps Kiev is trying to sort of switch the narrative or pull Russian forces away. But it's not clear how that's going to work. And I mean, that's what the Journal was saying today, that even some Ukrainian forces in the east were saying, hey, what about reinforcements here? So we'll have to see how it plays out. The Ukrainians have certainly, I think, impressed and included. And I think the Kremlin's kind of been knocked on its back foot a bit. But I don't see this as fundamentally changing the trajectory of the war.
Can you sort of prognosticate how you think this election here in the United States could impact all of what we're talking about?
Well, look, I think it's a huge question, Andrew. And I mean, to me, it's got to be one of the key factors in the election for Americans is looking out at the world. It's an exceptionally dangerous time. Not only the places you mentioned, but the Korean Peninsula and, of course, the Chinese are still preparing for a conflict. And moreover, there's a deep structural tension at the economic level where you see basically the Chinese continuing to focus on an export-led, industrial production model, and the rest of the world worrying about another China shock. That's a deep, very serious source of tension. Look, I'm biased. I support President Trump, but I think the current trajectory that we're on is not a good one. I mean, there's a lot of the rhetoric that people hear, which is, the rules-based international order and so forth. But what you really see is a yawning gap between our capabilities and our pledges. I mean, the carrier I mentioned, for instance, I believe there's no carrier in the Pacific right now. And the AP is reporting that the U.S. is behind on pretty much all of our naval programs. So, we're talking big, but we're not really following up. I think what we need is a fundamental reindustrialization, particularly of our defense industrial base, so we can produce for ourselves and for our allies like Israel and ideally Ukraine, Japan, et cetera, Taiwan, et cetera, but also a strong military that we use sparingly. I think that's the kind of a model we need, and I think we need a fundamental change because we're headed to a pretty bad place right now.